Hey Disemvowel, this is a response to your Gaming 101 video about what systems would be best for people to learn and play if they were taking a university level course to introduce into role-playing games. I've picked a shorter list because I believe school terms for university are about 4 months, which makes them about 80 training days. Let's try to pick a number of systems that will work for that time period. I'd also like to shout out to Blue Spruce 786, who did a fantastic video talking about mechanics as they evolved over these systems. Because he's already covered that topic, I'm going to stay away from mechanics. I want to talk about what the game is about. So let's go. The first on my list is also the first on your list, which is the original version of Dungeons & Dragons. Now I actually ran this for a few friends a couple months back, and while we didn't really think this was a system we'd want to play regularly, it was kind of a learning experience for us. We all wanted to see what this was about, and it has to be there. You have to see where things began to understand how they've evolved. Now D&D is also very far on the gamist side of things, and I want to cover the simulationist side of things as well, and for that I would suggest GURPS. Now I've actually never played GURPS or run GURPS or even read GURPS, but I do understand that this game is very much designed to simulate the world around you in whatever setting it may be. And for that reason it seems to be the best example of the simulationist type of game style. But again, I've never read it. There might be a better option out there. That's the best one I know of. My next suggestion is Sorcerer, and this will be the last of the games I've never played or read category. But from what I've understood and what I've read and what I've heard, Sorcerer was very influential. It changed a lot of what people think about what games are about and really allowed people to have a narrative control on things for a change. To me, that is where games really started to be different, is when people started to look at the game and say, how can we use this to create a good story, but not because it's being enforced on people or because it's being written, but because it comes out of what happens in the game. So the next on my list is another one from your list, which is Dogs in the Vineyard. Now I believe I have a slightly different takeaway from this. I do like the mechanics side of things, but what I like is how this game is built on morality. You can usually accomplish your task if you're willing to go to a violent or extreme enough method. You know, accomplishing your goal is kind of secondary. It's what you're willing to do to accomplish that goal. And the game never tells you implicitly that you are right or wrong for escalating an argument to violence or bringing your weapon into play just because you get more dice by doing so. And I don't think players are used to having that level of trust given to them, which makes this a fascinating game. So again, our lists coincide on Burning Wheel. Although I have different experience with this game as well. I've actually run quite a lot of it, I've played a fair bit of it, I've read the books, including the most recent version, and while character creation is great, I mean I do like life path systems, I think there's too much more to this to just focus on that. The biggest thing for me is how this system works in terms of its economy. You are, as a player, are only really given Artha, the role-playing rewards for playing to your character, to your traits, to your beliefs especially, and what you accomplish in-game. That's what you get rewarded for. That's what allows you to accomplish tasks. But of course, accomplishing tasks isn't necessarily what brings you to advancement. It's simply attempting to use a skill that will bring it to advancement for almost all of them. So the reason this one has such a great economy to it is because the system pushes you to constantly force your character into more and more extreme circumstances if they want to continue to advance. And the only way they can really have any chance of succeeding in these goals and not spiral their character into some terrible situation, which might very well be fun to play out, is by gaining Artha, the role-playing reward. So you have to play your character to advance your character, to succeed with your character, to push your character further. And it leads to some fantastic play. But it is a complicated system, and it would be a long one for people to read through and understand, but it would definitely be important. Now Fiasco also has to go on this list because Fiasco was the first GM-less game to really do well. And it did well for a reason. It was well written, it was well implemented, the ideas in it work perfectly for what it's meant to do, and it is a lot of fun. So Fiasco has to be there. Since I wanted to keep this list short, my next two are going to be very quick games to read, play, and understand. And the first one is My Life with Master. Now, mechanically it's a very simple game. You only have a few stats like fear, self-loathing, weariness, that kind of thing. But it accomplishes its task very well, which is to play a game about abusive relationships. I realize most gamers never ever want to play a game about abusive relationships, but because there are so many games that are trying to target people on an emotional level, I think it's very important to anyone learning about gaming to understand how these games work and what they do to accomplish that task. The next quick game is Kagematsu, which is another GM-less game. This one is about a Ronin samurai named Kagematsu who travels to a village where the village is under siege by some type of a threat which they are incapable of dealing with on their own. Maybe the men of the village are just not warriors, they are all off to war. Whatever the case is, the village women of this town, to save their lives, have to convince Kagematsu to stay and handle that problem. Now, what makes this game really interesting is the way it works with gender roles, because a female player is meant to play Kagematsu and male players are meant to play the village women. Now, I have personally played this game more than once, and it has always been the most challenging role-playing experience I've ever dealt with. Because it's not just playing cross-gender and in a different time period, but it is playing a character who has no power in the world beyond what they can convince somebody else to do for them. And that is why it will teach people more about role-playing. So the last on my list is Apocalypse World. This one has been making a lot of waves and has had a lot of people making hacks of it into other games. And there's a reason for that. This is really the first game that has put the color of the game first in terms of its mechanical usage. Let me give you an example. So we'll use a situation that can happen in many games and see how it works in Apocalypse World. And that situation is that you and your gang are taking on another gang at their hideout. And in this case, you're going to roll to seize by force. Be that their hideout, their lives, whatever, you are taking from them. Now, you roll decently. You get an 8, which in this game is a partial hit. So you look at the list for seize by force, and you can take definite hold of it, suffer little harm, inflict great harm, impress, dismay, or frighten your enemies. Now with your 8, you choose 2. And that means that you are picking from the story choices, not the mechanical choices, as the game resolves. So there's my answer. Great question, by the way, and I like to respond to a question with a question of my own, just to keep the conversation going. Based on what I heard on your list, it seems like you really enjoy systems that have something interesting to offer a person who's making a new character, either through the character creation process or maybe even the character sheet. So, what of character creation or character sheets in the systems that you've played before or seen before do you think best added something to the game once it was in play? What made it more interesting to you? And I look forward to hearing your reply.